Good evening, everyone. Yang Yan Zhao. Tonight, I am joined by an all-star cast. The reason of our gathering is Deathmatch, the Orange Spine editions of AD&D, first edition, not second. For anyone who doesn't know, we had a release of Player's Handbook, Monster Manuals, and Dungeon Master's Guide. And then later, we had the Orange Spine series, which gives us more rules, more edge case scenarios. Is that right? Is it not right? Should we all bleach our eyes for having seen them?
Yes,
My
yes.
cast tonight will answer that question from the Great Old Ones channel, the Great Old One.
Good
Uh,
evening. Good evening.
Next, we have Gonzo Lira's bar tab.
Sir, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Down below, we have Doom Sword. And rounding us out, we have
Yo, how's it going?
right from his vacation, the Dungeon Delver.
They don't come much rounder than me.
All right, gentlemen, round one. Gonzalo, I believe you had a topic to start us off with.
So I just noticed that I have tried to use Orange Spine stuff or say I was going to use it, and many people who stuck with uh, first edition AD&D and didn't leave it for Rollmaster or something else and played it a lot longer, and that idea seemed to be getting poo-pooed all the time. And I didn't like that just because my ideas were being, so I thought, well, let me learn more. That's why I play with Great Old Ones and Dungeon Delvers, to learn about first edition. So I don't want to waste my time on stuff that they can prove unbalances the game. The first thing that I thought was sort of a should be in use in a first edition AD&D campaign from an Orange Spine book would be the weapon specialization for fighters and rangers. That's topic number one. Why can't I use it? Over to you, Great Old Ones.
You can absolutely use whatever you want in your game, but for me, one of the things I always refer to the Dungeon Master's Guide with Gary Gygax, kind of poo-pooed those sorts of things, and then he went and wrote a book about that. The weapon specialization, to my mind, reading through it, and I'm not the only one who thinks this way, kind of unbalances the game in favor of the players. Right? It kind of throws some fairness out of there. Monsters don't get it. Your opponents don't get it. And that's not really a fair game if you weigh things heavily towards the players. And I believe weapon specialization kind of does that.
So I would say that weapon specialization, in terms of balance, unbalances the game far less than some spells that are in first edition AD&D. It only two classes get it. Classes that, as someone who has played both those classes exclusively the last couple of years in first edition AD&D, a lot of times you can start to feel like you're not bringing anything to the table because the spellcasters just destroy everything before you can really get a chance. Now, this doesn't happen to Paul, for example, because Paul's got an outlier strength that is a thing that makes it a little more fun. The ranger I have in your game, Great Old Ones, has like 13 strength, 13 dex. Like, he has the minimum for that class. He doesn't get a lot of stuff. I can you explain how just that compared to like spells and things unbalances the game and
Well,
too far in favor of the players?
your monsters have access to spells too. You got spellcasters and stuff on the other side. They have magical powers and abilities and things like that that match that sort of thing. The main part of weapon specializations, basically changes the damage output of a player character. There's an article that Len Lakofka and Dooms and I've talked extensively about Len's stuff because we both study his thing. But his point is just with weapon specialization, it changes your damage output. And I'm trying to glance over here at the paragraph from an average of 1.35 to an average of 3.4125. So you're pretty much more than doubling the damage output of a fighter character, and that's the only one that gets it.
And Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fine for the fighters. They love that sort of thing, but it changes the game towards those fighter characters.
I have to admit to being someone and whoever wants to jump in. I'm not a real, like, I don't care about the numbers. I like the feel
Yeah.
of the
Okay.
game. I understand what you're saying. You can mathematically say this is why you shouldn't put it in the game. I'm not, but so you win that point totally. We're kind of not having the same argument. My point is, it makes the game more fun. I think the DM can kill the players if the DM wants to kill the players.
Oh, absolutely.
So
That goes for any version of it you want to. Yeah.
right. So
that's not the point.
But what I'm saying is, knowing that it's not a real threat to the GM's power, because the GM can pit them against things that are going to kill them, and I think it makes it funner in general. So I think we're having two different discussions on it, kind of there. Doomsword or Dungeon Delver. You guys have thoughts on? Am I being unreasonable?
So
no, not at all.
I think there's a context here that we need to address about the quote unquote Orange Spine books. Unearthed Arcana came into being as a company saving measure. It was extremely rapid battlefield triage to stop TSR from bleeding to death. And it was very much in danger of doing so. Gary grabbed a bunch of articles that were half-baked out of Unearthed Arcana, and they assembled a rule book, not just an options book. You got to remember that Gary says this is now part of your tabletop. All of it is now part of your tabletop. They assembled a rule book in 6 months with, I don't know how much playtesting, but probably not as much as we might have liked. And one of the things that I think came out of this rapid work was the idea that gaming groups had shrunk. When AD&D started, if you look or not AD&D, but when D&D started, if you look in original D&D, it addresses the idea of a game table with 20 to 40 people playing original D&D in a session, not in a campaign, in a session. Now, I've DM'd for 24 at a con, and that was death. I never want to do that again. I tell people I did that, and they're like, oh man, that must have been a blast. Yeah, in retrospect, but that's kind of like, yeah, I built my own house. But
I don't need to be kicked in the balls to know I don't want to be kicked in the balls.
Yes, good. But to get back to present day, by which I mean 1974, here's the rules saying, anywhere from a tiny handful up to 40 people playing D&D. I think there was a perception that group size had shrunk despite the fact that the game's popularity had grown, that it was no longer like, well, I live in Des Moines. I know one person who will referee D&D. So we're all going to go to that person. It was, oh, Bobby got the rules. Okay, all right. Well, me, Linda, and Jim will all sit down and play. And so when you want to play something like G123 or jump into the Temple of Elemental Evil or what have you, and there's only 2 or 3 of you and you don't want to run 4 characters each, what do? Well, even if you're creating low level or even if you're creating high level characters out of the box, you've got characters who are individually, even at 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th level for some of those modules, excuse me, too weak to carry them off by themselves. So I think there was perhaps a misinterpretation. Maybe it was based on RPGA data, maybe it was based on feedback to Dragon or Polyhedron or to the books themselves or observations at conventions, yada, 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 that the gaming group had shrunk, and that to balance that back out on the back end, what was it? The power curve went from 1.3 to 3 point something. So now you've got a character who's effectively as tough as 2 characters. So rather than, Nils the fighter has to also, or Bob playing Nils the fighter and Sir Robin the fighter and so on. Now he can just go to Nils the fighter because Nils the fighter is double specialized in strength bows and can hit with a force of 3 arrows in a single shot versus, fire an arrow. Oh my God, he's been hit, so he's down. So now we're down to 2 characters. So I think that a lot of that power ramp was based on likely spurious, because understand, this is 1984. Things are in utter chaos in Lake Geneva, but probably spurious data that led Gary and others to make this decision to hockey stick that power curve in an attempt to get this rule book out into people's hands. Now, it served its purpose. It netted TSR post-tax profit of $23 million, a net profit of $23 million, stop the bleeding, turn things around. Big win. But now you've armed Monty Hall GMs and Munchkins with, now people will say that Supplement 1 Greyhawk was the first Splat book, and that's where the power ramp up began, and it only got worse with Supplement 2 and Supplement 3, and then they thought they could kill gods with gods, demigods, and heroes, and yada, yada, yada. But really, those were the Mercury shots compared to the moon shot that was Unearthed Arcana in terms of thrust power of Splat books. That is where things really went from a gradual upwards power curve to just a vertical shot straight up. So I think it's important that we frame this in that context of what the book was and what information it was based on. Now, today, we've had 50 years to mull this over, to digest this, to see what it does to the gestalt of first edition AD&D. And we're talking about a book that is old enough to be looking at its own children saying, when are you going to bring me some grandbabies? That's how old this book is. I think then in that respect, we should be a lot more circumspect about just dragging it in, and we should look at the overall effect. Yes, it's very cool to hit with your longsword 4 times in a round because you're double specialized in your 7th level, when you have a group that's still 5, 6, 7, 8 strong. Because then I, as the dungeon master, will go, man, they took down Nosnera and his wife and his lieutenant in a single fucking round. The Frost Giants are going to be tougher. I'm going to increase that. And then it stops being meaningful. Then it's just number go up.
Can I jump in on one point that you're making there? Do you mind?
I'm finished with my thesis, so please.
And then you're playing 5e.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what 5e did, really, in a nutshell. Go for it, Gonzo.
No, I'm sorry. The only thing I wanted to say is that I kind of like smaller groups. I'm starting to think this is why I kind of went. I think maybe what happened is I went into Rollmaster and quit 1e and you guys all just continued to play 1E, and I didn't gather the data. But I will say I actually like smaller role play groups with not high with really. I never playing things with hirelings or any of that. You play your players, and I tend to give the players the benefit of the doubt and let them be a little more powerful, so and cut down on the NPC overhead. I think to me it aids the role play, which I think it done right this could also do. But you guys are definitely scoring all dunking on me in terms of what the opinions of the community is, and sources and
No.
history and all that. You guys are completely you know what you're talking about, so I'm glad to talk about it. I'd be interested to know what Dooms thinks.
Yeah, yeah. Let me, if that's the case, let me lend you a little bit of a hand, right? Because there were those of us who were just a little bit younger than the guys before us. I mean, still all Gen X type guys and stuff like that. And there were those of us who were a little bit older. Say there's those of us who are 3, 4 years older, and 3 to 5 years younger in either direction. And for some of us who are just a little bit younger, buying those orange spine books was part of our entire development as AD&D dungeon masters and as AD&D players. And sometimes we would be, well, we would always be too poor to buy that stuff, right? But we'd get it up, and as a matter of fact, that for my 13th birthday, my sole birthday present, and who cares about birthday presents, but my sole birthday present was a copy of the Orange Spine Legends and Lore. Right now, I had
Nice.
had access to deities and demigods before that, but that birthday and that birthday present for that, what were they, like $14.95, $12.95 or something for the 128 page books? That birthday present was about the best birthday present I ever got, because I would sit and explore these books and explore everything within them as far as I could within reason, because that's what made me happy. Um, so so there's a specific amount of generational gap between the generations that I think people should spend a little bit more time embracing, because some of this stuff was very, very meaningful to a subset of the hobby, just as some of the older stuff was certainly meaningful to a subset of the hobby, and certain of the newer stuff will be. So what ends up happening is, if you shut out that stuff out of hand, and I'm sure there's a logical thing. Throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm sure there's a logical fallacy associated with that. Not that anybody would intentionally do that. You end up in a situation where you're destroying a part of what was the legacy of TSR, even though it moved past Gary, and it discounts a large part of the importance of the 1980s as a whole before 2E came out. For Dungeon Delver, I want to say that that was a very astute observation in terms of sort of what led into, I hadn't thought about it that way, of what led into sort of the splat book type of thing. And very astute, and I have to give that some more thought. But in towards the other end of the spectrum with this stuff, whether or not you were there for it at the time, is that the first 3 books told us to use what rules we wanted to use from any of the books, right? So the first 3 books were absolute canon, and of course that was something that Gary had to do out of necessity, particularly since tournament AD&D was starting, and that was a big deal. We had the lawsuits and stuff, regarding how much Arneson was entitled to. and those things. So, and in issues would talk about things in those terms. If it's not Grenadier, if it's not TSR, it's not official, and screw you for using it. And it would, but as things, as things progressed, I think the idea became less about that and more back to what it was intended to be in the first place. Is, hey, we present this stuff out to you. You use whatever you want. If you look at the of Dragonbind, you'll all sorts of articles from the TSR luminaries, the old guys, the original guys who would really lend the Kafka, the guys who would really get into complexity in the game out of a love for the mechanics and passion. And Gary didn't have anything to say about that, and it was basically, and I look at Unearthed Arcana, and that's how I look at the rest of the Orange Spine books, and regardless of TSR's corporate circumstances at the time.
Oh,
Did
we lose him?
That doesn't.
Oh, you're in and out there, Doom Sword.
Dang it! I was loving his conclusion.
How I feel about that.
I think we can safely say what he meant to say was that he is on my side in the argument. Yeah, he's really.
Oh no!
He's really...
I'll ping him on
it's
Discord.
not coming
Let's see.
Yeah, we start losing.
Well,
I'll say it for this. I never used the Orange books as a kid. We played just the original 3 because that's basically we got those for Christmas, and then played that until 2nd edition came out. So when I'm looking at the Orange books, I'm looking at it from the years of experience of playing just straight core 3 books. Right, and then now, okay, what do these other books have to offer? And I'm looking, analyzing, going, no, that doesn't seem to match, doesn't seem to fit.
Well,
but there are pieces you can take out of them.
Yeah. So if I could jump in as a warning from the future, with Gonzalo mentioned like he's not really using hirelings and this and that, but this is something that I think we have to be very careful of, because if you look at 5th edition, one of the big strikes against it is people say it really sucks after like level 11, because there's nothing much there. And really, you can trace a lot of this back to doing away with encumbrance. Now, 5e does have encumbrance, and you're supposed to be using it. It's just most people don't. So when you basically have unlimited inventory, you don't need hirelings, and the no, everybody's got dark vision, so you don't need torches anymore. There's really no reason to have hirelings. So if you don't have hirelings, you're not paying for hirelings. You're not used to having NPCs that basically work under your command. If you can carry 50,000 gold pieces on you at all times, you don't need a keep with which to store it. So therefore, you lose all that later domain play. And so my cautionary tale on some of the rules is that, it could just be a very small thing. Like, oh, okay, let him carry a little more. What's the big deal? Well, it could potentially snowball and ruin things later on. The same thing with like egregious amounts of attacks. One of the now 5e and 1e are a little bit different in terms of maximum level, so I would expect the power creep to be a little more in 5e anyways. But I think that we if you look at how the game is played, like many of the monsters are way under the amount of hit points you would need to make the fights interesting, or they are way under the amount of attacking points that they would have. And this to me seemed I'm not necessarily a big balance guy, but there is a certain point where you could see like everything becomes too easy.
I totally agree. I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. I just, I'm going to have it proved to me by playing that this
Okay.
unbalances
Sure.
the game. You guys are all making good points that I don't disagree with, but I feel like as a GM, it's within my skill set to manage the use of weapon specialization in my 1E game. I'm not saying use all of Unearthed Arcana, but I've not been convinced I shouldn't at least try. But you guys all made
no.
great arguments.
Yeah, no.
Try it exactly. Is it right for you? That's the
Ask your
Dimford made a
doctor.
point when they made it mandatory, they kind of took away your option.
Yeah. So thanks for the warning from the future, Yang. Appreciate that. I had an idea. The Gonzalo group, a McLaughlin group style discussion. Like, issue number 2.
Wrong.
The Drow. Should they be in your first edition AD&D game?
No.
Well, tell us why. You said no right out of the gates.
Well, if I may, sorry, go ahead. I just don't want to move off of that topic of weapon specialization without saying a specific piece.
Finish it up. Yep. Go right for it. Keep going.
Okay. So it's like this to me. Weapon specialization isn't really a problem in so much that these things, I mean, Gary already gave us his guidance, right? Critical hits are going to have to be something that applies to both the monsters and the player characters. Okay. The odds are way stacked against player characters, right? And since the monster attack matrix is basically devised from the fighter attack matrix, that means to me that if you're going to use weapon specialization, every single monster that's a warrior type is going to have weapon specialization. Why would they not? Right?
Absolutely.
Why would an orc not be specialized in his weapon? Why would a goblin not be? For these warlike tribes who are outside of civilization, the barbarism and the fight to survive that these individuals might have, if you want to think about it from a fantastical perspective or something, why would they not be just as well trained as everybody else? So now your first level party going up against 5 goblins. Well, these goblins are warriors. They're the standard goblins. They're not the females or the youngs, or the young. They're standard goblins, and those guys are rolling up on you with weapon specialization themselves. So I'll borrow something that Anthony Huso says, because I appreciate the guy. He says human beings will, paraphrased, human beings will discover that applying rules like these are bad for people's health. But I mean, human beings do a whole lot of things, like smoking cigarettes, that's bad for their health. So if your players want to use that, then they're very brave.
I would absolutely love for my hill giants to have 4 swings with their clubs.
They should, and I mean, as a matter of fact, and I don't want to hog anything because I motor mouth, but as a matter of fact, all these giants and stuff should have, the exceptional strength and the requisite strength that's applied in Unearthed Arcana, and I believe all of those things should apply on the to hit roll and the damage adjustment.
I would break it down along the lines of, if you're actually a fighter, which is a character class, not just a big thing that fights, you get it. So giants would not get it in my game, but brigands but you see what I'm saying? Like, that's how I would interpret that.
Yeah.
Things that can be that class would get it. Because it's about the class for me.
Well, I mean, you could argue that frost giants, that's their culture, is a warrior culture.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's even better. Yeah.
But you said the great old ones. So I wanted to talk about the drow, and you just jumped out with no. So
there's enough non-player character classes as there is in there. I would like to see more humans played, less non-humans played.
I agree.
And just reskinning elves into different versions just kind of doesn't really do them justice. It kind of thins out.
I had more respect for your numbers argument than this one. I do have to say. And that didn't persuade me. I mean, so it's a vibe thing for you. You don't see the benefit.
Right, and they're supposed to be mysterious and never heard of them. They never seen it before. What is this drow thing? That's impossible. They don't exist, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden you run into them. It's like, whoa, what is that? Well, no, now they live in the cities and they interact with everybody else. And,
yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not. Yes, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, I play human. Like I play a human in your game, and I play a human in Delver's game. Humans should make up the majority of the population of the world if it's that kind of general fantasy setting. However, because if everyone's special, no one's special. But I'm also not afraid of the special. I am, and there's another topic nested in this one, but as a GM, I feel confident in my capabilities to correctly balance an NPC and or even a player character drow. Because and the subtopic of this is that this could be a whole thing on its own. I am not against people playing evil parties as long as they all agree they want to play it. I am confident enough in my GMing abilities to handle that kind of scenario, which this would lend itself to that kind of setting. You wouldn't have a player character that was a drow, and except for maybe an extreme once in a while who would be an outcast, they would mostly be in evil parties. So, anyways, that's my interest in them.
Sure. And I'd say go ahead and use them if you want to use them from that standpoint. Like when I play 5e, if somebody will let me play a drow, I'm playing a drow monk. Way of the shadow, right? And
drunk,
I'm
if you
cleaning
will.
House with that drow.
A drunk. That's awesome. And I would say that we all have the anecdotal stories, especially if we look at the old materials. I would say that Gary's response to you, even though I've only briefly met the man, would be, why are you asking me? Obviously you have your campaign under control, right?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, no one here is probably going to convince me to not least to try all the things that I'm bringing up as topics tonight. However, I'm assuming you once in a while run into, I don't know, based on my opinions and what I've seen so far about me hanging out with you guys, I'm less experienced than all of you. And as a role play person, I'm a little bit of, for as experienced as I am, I'm a little bit of an outlier, I would say, in my tastes about role playing games. So I think I'm a good person to ask these kind of questions, because it provides you with a way of saying, here's all of our experience as to what we think about it and the history to things.
Well, I'm brand new to this. I don't know anybody invited me to this conversation.
Well, as a guy who put drow in his campaign guide,
yes,
that's yours. Use them. Exactly. We're not saying don't. We're saying this is why we don't. That's a different story entirely.
Let me just opine. I think that this is a situation that is eminently fixable by the DM. And what I mean is, I too prefer like a general fantasy thing. I don't like tieflings. I don't like minotaurs. I don't want centaurs. I don't want anything that has fur. Did I say tieflings? Because let me put that in there again.
Yes.
And tieflings. So the issue is really, if this is your setting and humans are the norm, and you have something like a drow that is a mysterious race, like, wouldn't they maybe confuse them for demons?
Yes.
Wouldn't they be high? The general population would be highly prejudicial against them, and that's on the DM to bring it out. Like your party goes into town and they're like, "Holy crap, they're with a demon!" And the pitchforks and torches get raised immediately, and they try to kill the drow and maybe imprison the rest of you. So then, maybe if somebody still wants to play a drow, okay, maybe they have to go in disguise.
Finally, a real GM
be it,
in here.
Be it magic or whatnot. In my test groups for Empire of the Undying Sun, there's always somebody who wants to be something that they shouldn't, and I tell them, okay, a buddy of mine who was in one of the first test groups, he wanted to play a Minotaur, and I was like, okay. So there were people trying to hunt him to eat his heart, so they would get his power, and it worked out okay. And then we had two people who were tieflings, and I said, well, okay, your god will give you like a medallion that essentially allows you to disguise yourself, but it doesn't work at dawn and dusk. And there were a few times they forgot, and they got run out of town, and one of them died because of it.
That's a pretty elegant way of handling that. I don't think I'm capable of anything but no tieflings.
Well, if you kill them off quick, they got to roll up something else new, and it's fine.
So go ahead, Delbert.
I don't like the Forehead of the Week club. I really don't. I think Gary made a serious mistake allowing Drow to be playable. I think it was a huge error. I blame the Drizzt novels for saddling us with this horrible trope, because everybody, I mean, it's largely tieflings now, but I mean, Drow are now light purple and all good. That's literally what Drow have become. But I feel like the the chance to do it uniquely, that was lost in the mad rush of adolescent hands and feet in 1985. I just don't like Drow from a player character standpoint. If you play them as they should be, they're so incredibly front loaded, they're going to outshine the characters. If you play them gimped as they should be, why would you bother playing one? You are not accepted in good society. You literally cannot show your hands and face, and you cannot go out in the sun. It will make you sick.
A full party of Drow would be an example of a time where I would do that. An evil party.
Playing in Eri Sinlu, not in just walking down the street of divers or something like that. But I just feel like there was this mad scramble to try the new thing, and now we're stuck with it. I feel like it's part of a runaway power curve, and we're saddled with it. And all I can do as a dungeon master is to be the guy that plants the no fun sign and says, look, humans, elves, half-elves, halflings, half-orcs, gnomes, and that's and dwarves, and that's it. Because otherwise, again, it's just like I put those D&D horror stories or sometimes glory stories on from Reddit and stuff like that as background noise when I'm shuffling around the office sometimes. And I hear them like in the setup for the story, like, so here's our party. We had a turtle sorcerer. We had a tiefling bard warlock combo. We had a Loxodont paladin and my own homebrew reflavored Selkie rogue. And I'm just like, you're speaking Chinese, brother. That's not even D&D. What are you talking about? And it all stems back from this, I mean, and you say, oh, why step in? Why, oh, it's just fun. Like, dude, you got to impose some limits. Ice cream is delicious. We're not going to have it breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Oh man, really?
You know, a jet
No fun
powered
at the Delver household.
a jet powered car is a
Oh.
neat thing. You don't need one to take you to the grocery store. You know, every Saturday cannot be a trip to Disney. Sometimes your fun thing is going to the movies. In fact, most of the time, it's doing little things that are fun, and it is a now. I want that dopamine surge right this very second, and if I don't get it, well, I'm going to pout and I'm going to call you the no fun GM because, I can't play my quarter drow, half Durgar, 1/3 Arokara, uh, paladin, thief, assassin. It's just like, draw a fucking line. And I think that line should be drawn at the statement in the Dungeon Master's Guide: Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is a humanocentric game. I'm sorry, I'm absolutely going to get my old man pants on about this.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, I
no,
I'm sorry, go
I
ahead, Doom.
agree with that, and you raised some very.
Oh, here we go again with them.
Oh,
YouTube. Yeah. Overloading it.
oh.
Yeah.
Max Headroom event.
Well, not many
This
people
is,
are gonna understand Max Headroom. Yeah.
This is Big Drow trying to take him down.
Yeah.
Is he
We
back?
lost you, Dooms. Can you restate for us?
Yeah, everything locked up again. I'm not entirely sure why. You guys can hear me now, okay?
Yes.
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 Okay, yeah, I specifically wanted to counter that point because you put out very good advice, and of course we were all, especially those of us who were buying these books as all of my friends at the time, started coming out with their special character that they made up over the weekend, who was a fit owl something or other. They didn't actually see any playtime or anything like that. But back to the point at hand, I mean, Gary did also, prior to him making them a playable race, did even in what OD&D, Men in Magic specifically, right? And then in the Dungeon Master's Guide, tell us what to do as DMs if a character wants to, if a player wants to play a monster, and how we should restrict that. And he specifically, and it's many times, obviously, that he's contradicted himself. Everybody does it. I've contradicted myself in this very sentence. But he specifically says if a character wants to play a gold dragon, why not? Let them, and then figure out that as soon as they figure out they got to go through age categories, abide by the restrictions of, so the player will figure out quickly that that's not the character race or class for them if it's allowed in the first place by the dungeon master, right? So, but sure, you want to play a drow, go ahead and play a drow. But check this out: you can only move under the cover of night. You can't be out in the sun. Everyone is going to hate you. They're going to think you're an outsider, like from the H.P. Lovecraft story. Or if they do recognize you, you're going to be perceived as evil at best. Minus 30% reaction adjustment to non-elves, minus 50% reaction adjustment to elves because they know who you are, and things like that. So
exactly. Yes.
You don't necessarily, and 5e really has created this sense of entitlement that if it's canon, according to WotC, which we're not really talking about, according to WotC, especially if you're going to run a game online or whatever, you also have to use X cards, safety cards, whatever that other damn thing is that somebody has to use. I can't remember the names of them all. But the idea that Gygax always instilled in us was if a player wants to do something, prove to them why it is a bad idea. And if a player wants to bring something into your game that you do not agree with, then don't allow it. Even from the very beginning, even when he was trying to sell books, and even when he would say stuff like, this is official D&D stuff. official AD&D stuff. Use it as you may. Anything that's not this, and that might just be copy pasted out of Dragon, but the motive and why he did that to save the company that he cared about. I try not to question that and still adhere to the spirit of what he taught me when I was a young boy.
I think what I'm hearing in general, to sum up kind of the vibe, is that everybody is presenting some really good sort of and this is not negative, it's just a descriptor. And it's not, I'm not saying you're doing a logical fallacy, I'm just saying they seem to be slippery slope arguments against it, which is a valid way of arguing. I'm not judging using that. And I don't disagree with you at all. I think I'm on exactly the same page you guys are on. Negative social effects, hunted down like dogs, all of that stuff. Unless you're in an evil group, I just think I can handle it as a GM and not let it become a problem.
Gonzalo's over here like, but guys, what if everybody in the band played bass?
Yeah, that's right.
So hear me out.
Yeah, the bigger the cushion. Oh, I'm sorry. I probably. There was actually a band in Athens, Georgia, in the '80s, in the mid-late '80s, called the Groove Trolls, that had 3 bass players.
Oh God!
So,
I forgot about them until just now.
They were not. I mean, they were interesting. I'll put it that way. There are many, many worse bands than them. Were you going to say something 5th edition around this, Yang, or?
No. Well, I mean, if you want to see where a slippery slope leads,
yeah,
gotcha.
And the thing is, like, I know that Critical Role is not popular, but in one of their seasons, like, they were all, like a tiefling and like a mer guy and this and that. And they went around and, like, a lot of people thought they were like circus freaks. And that's kind of where we're going, except they're not circus freaks anymore. They're just like people who live down the road. So it gets weird. And unfortunately, yeah, and it really does rob the game of a lot of, like, the intrigue, and elves don't like dwarves, and tieflings and gnomes are buddies, but they don't like outsiders, and when everybody likes everybody, there's no conflict. And one thing that makes games interesting is conflict, which doesn't always have to be combat. One group or idea versus another is a very interesting thing to play. And, if you want to make everybody the same and no one's mad at anybody else, then, what's the point?
All good points. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, if we're continuing on, is the new race class level combinations on page 8 of Unearthed Arcana. I don't really have an opinion about those, other than my default setting would be use them, because to me it's just more culturally interesting to me than the original stuff. That's about all I have on that one, but I bet you guys have opinions.
I'll tell you something. I'm a dude. I never saw a huge problem with the Thief Acrobat class. And if that means that, Dooms is going to drive over to my house and slash my tires, so be it. But I never had a problem with that. I don't like the Cavalier having the Paladin under them. I think thematically, the Cavalier is a vainglorious, arrogant jerk of a character. And I don't. It's the egoism. It's the self glorification of the Cavalier that makes me not want the Cavalier is written fine. Leave the Paladin as a fighter subclass. Have the Cavalier be like the monk. He's just off in a field by himself. I don't oppose the Barbarian class thematically, I just think the mechanics for the barbarian in Unearthed Arcana are screwed up 6 ways to Sunday, and I don't like the Unearthed Arcana barbarian. I think it should be gutted and completely rewritten. Otherwise, I'm okay with what Unearthed Arcana has to say on the topic.
Interesting.
Expanding
as
the
far
level
as,
limit is probably not
oh,
so
go ahead.
broken. Yeah, expanding level limits I think is not so broken. I mean, that just it gives them some of the non-human characters a little bit of a boost as to where they could go. Little less limited than they were. Not terrible. Not terrible.
Sure.
Yeah, and I feel the same way about the level limits. I have more trouble with it. Just the expanses. It's almost like, Player's Handbook and Monster Manual talk about stouts and tall fellows in terms of halflings and whatnot, and then they had to kind of fill out all of that information, and then they decided to fill out other races and races that there's no way, for example, that let me put it this way: Sverfneblin is not going to have a good time in a game that I'm running any more than a drow is. Can they play? Yeah, a high up, a wood elf, that they're not going to have a good time either. What's a gray elf? Not going to have a good time. I mean, I kind of have my opinion on where these things come from and them being options, but I think under certain campaigns they could work. I think that the increase of the level limits for the basic stuff is appropriate. I think the expanded weapon use table is appropriate for the most part. Same with armor use. They cleaned up the ranger class in terms of what represents the giant class creature, although I think they could have done that way easier, but not without printing a bunch of books. But to Bill's point about the classes, yeah, I don't have a problem with Thief Acrobat. It's a live type of character. I think you could create, I think you could do it differently. It's a specialized type of character, but I hate the paladin being under the cavalier for all the reasons he mentioned. And the barbarian, the one thing that I will say about the barbarian is it's much more similar to a historical Viking archetype than it is to something like Conan. And the easy thing would have been to put in Conan, but Gary had opinions about Conan and his classes and levels and all of that kind of stuff that was pretty interesting in the first place. But yeah, I liked the background of the barbarian and the idea that they introduced you to. Hey, this is a guy who's wilderness focused more than say REH Conan and Civilization focused. They had every opportunity to make it an Arnold Schwarzenegger from Conan the Destroyer moment, and they chose not to do that. And I appreciate that because I think it was a brave decision, even though they simply probably just reprinted what was in Dragon Magazine and didn't give any thought to that. But yeah, that's how I feel about those core things. Now the we haven't spoken about it, but the roll 96, for Cavalier strength or something like that. I don't particularly buy that roll method.
Yeah, method 5. Method 5 is awful.
Yeah, method 5.
But have you tried method 3? That's my
method 3. Yes, that's when you roll 2d7 and add 3, right?
Yes. I don't know that there is anything on this that can be said related to 5th edition, really, Yang.
Sure. Well, I think Joe brings up a point here. I feel like level limits make humans more desirable. Without them, a human will be chosen much less. And that's effectively what happened in later versions. There is no downside to picking a fantasy race. Whereas one of the things I really do like about AD&D and earlier is that for the most part, like, yeah, I'm gonna get dark vision, and maybe I can figure out the direction I'm traveling underground, and maybe I have bonuses to rolling against poisons, and that's all very cool. But then I shouldn't be able to get as powerful as a race that doesn't get any of those benefits. And the problem with it is then left up to either the DM who's homebrewing something or to the authors who are creating campaign settings to really make it obvious, like, why you would want humans. And then it just generally tends to be humans are oppressive dicks. So I think you do lose a lot. Like, to me, choosing your race slash occupation is a resource, and you need to balance how you want to play. Are you all in on punching stuff, or are you a smarty who can cast spells? Are you nimble fingered like a halfling thief? It's all, it's you have to balance things out, and that's what makes the game fun, in my opinion. If everything is the same, it's not nearly as interesting, and really, there's no reason to pick humans.
I will say that I completely agree with having a mechanism to discourage playing non-humans in first edition AD&D. I agree with that, but the system they have in place, I don't know what the good description of it would be. Like, it seemed like a blunt instrument intended to just not even have the argument. Like, limiting it never made sense to me, because I kept thinking of, like, Galadriel and these elves, and and, like, so what are you telling me? Galadriel's 8th level? I mean, like, limiting their level seemed like, just, I get why they probably did it, because these guys, this is chaos in the early days of this game, and some older person, I need a rule to shut these people up.
Well, okay. So first of all, don't fall into the trap of thinking that Tolkienian elves are.
I know.
All right, but also, and this is kind of based a little bit on hearsay, conversation with Gary, which unfortunately, I mean, this may have been something that got committed to paper had Gary done his own second edition, but we'll never know. And that is the idea that the demi-humans, particularly when you're talking about, an elf who's going to live for 2,000 more years, 3,000 more years, and it's like, oh, okay, well, you're a 7th level magic user, I guess that's it. Is they take that skill set home with them eventually, and they hone their skills there, and it kind of becomes something different. I know that's very hand wavy, and that's too cute by half, and, well, isn't that convenient? That this happens where I can't see it. That's very convenient of you, isn't it? But at the same time, I think a good GM will make it work. And as far as demi-human level limits, I mean, it's a rule system. Why does armor make it harder to hit instead of reducing damage? Why does why
it's not Rollmaster. They did it right. I won't tell you this again. Smurfs are
well, and those are really good points that I hadn't heard. But great old ones, and I think we just what was it, Sunday, our little thing that we just decided to do because we had nothing else to do or whatever it was. We actually talked about that a little bit from the perspective. So I'm going to try to lend the perspective of the ecology of the fantasy world, right? If all of these creatures have lifespans far exceeding man, and they're not, let's just say they're not building nuclear weapons and that kind of stuff, then they will quickly dominate the entire landscape of the world, right? Because let's say you're a human who has a maximum age of like 120 years, and then you've got an elf, a gray elf or something that can live like 1,200 years. If that there is no way that the game can remain human-centric without, or the fantasy world itself can remain human-centric without level limits on demi-humans. Now, you can justify that however you want as a GM. You can take the stance that, yeah, they go back into the forest in Selene, and and they keep their magic there. They sail off, to like Forgotten Realms, Evermeet, or something like that when they become too powerful. There's lots of
The
ways you
dwarves
can do
yearn
that
for the
within the
mines.
world. Right, exactly. But with that, from the perspective of just basically how your fantasy world would have evolved over time before play began, it's unbelievable to not have level limits and still have it be a human-centric world. And Gygax says as much in the DMG. I can't remember the page, but it's early on enough,
I went
and
and
it's
grabbed
true.
a beer. My girlfriend was like, "How's it going?" And I was like, "I'm getting quadruple teamed." And she's like, "That's nice."
Hey man, I'm on your side.
I know.
Of
I do
course,
have another.
that's nice though, right?
Yeah. I do have another issue. If you guys want to talk about it, if you were done, Doomsword, or are you still? Do you still want to?
Yeah, no, I'm done, and I'll talk. I'll talk to the cows come home, but we have no
Issue
cows.
number 4: Wilderness proficiencies.
Oh
I
yeah.
like them. I don't see any reason not to use them, and I intend on using them. Why am I stupid? Great old ones.
Absolutely not. I think I like those too. The addition of the non-weapon proficiencies that they brought out adds some flavor that you can take and use. It really wasn't fleshed out well enough in first edition. It's just a brief table in the Dungeon Master's Guide. It didn't give you a whole lot to work with. This was your profession before you became an adventurer, and that's where it left it. Where adding that stuff into later editions gave you some pieces to help make your character unique compared to the rest of them. I don't think that I would tell you go ahead and use them. I kind of like those.
Nice. Anyone else?
Yes.
Are you going in turn? Yeah, go in turn. So
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
know when to talk. Gonzalo, come on, man.
We'll go
That's basic
clockwise.
I don't have a channel. What do you?
Well,
I'm a professional sidekick. I have no channel.
Well, you're the one responsible for asking the question, so come
Yeah.
on, man.
Oh, sorry, I dropped the ball.
He's the Paul Schaefer to our David Letterman's.
We'll go clockwise. So that's Delver then Dooms.
Absolutely not. Non-weapon proficiencies and so on and etc. are not needed in first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. The reason is it is a game of avatars, not a game of character build. It is assumed that your character can swim, can climb a tree, can make a small snare, can mend their clothes, can negotiate for a decent price on food, drink, or someplace at the inn, can speak at least eloquently enough insofar as they can speak, can tell the difference between an elderberry and a blackberry, can leaves of 3, leave it be, etc. It's assumed that they can do all these things, or else they wouldn't go out and stick their heads into gilt holes full of monsters to potentially lose them. AD&D is not a skill-based RP system. It is a system of avatars. You do not live on that character sheet. You state what you're going to do, and then you do it. The secondary skills is perhaps one of the most egregiously misnamed systems in AD&D. It should have been called like prior backgrounds or something like that, because it doesn't really apply to things you can do. If a character brings up a specific situation and the game master feels he needs a die roll to adjudicate it, he can. But generally speaking, AD&D is meant to be a system where your character has basic functionality. How they work in the heat of the moment with a sword, with a spell, with stealth, whatever it is, with their piety, that is what determines the tone and the modus of the game, not carting through list after list of percentile rolls and up modifiers and down modifiers to find out if they can tie their shoe or walk and chew bubble gum at the same time without suffering a 65E fracture. AD&D is a game of avatar play, not a skill-based system. And the skill system in Wilderness Survival Guide and Dungeoneer Survival Guide tell you to do two mechanically completely different things for skill resolution. They're not even compatible with each other. I don't think it's a good system. On the contrary, I think it's a bad system. I think it fundamentally changes the nature of Dungeons and Dragons, just like ditching ditching 6 stats or ditching alignment. It is a fundamental part of D&D play, and it is absolutely a fundamental foundational part of AD&D that it is not a game of skills. And let me head you off here and say that a thief's functions are different from everyday skills. I am a pretty okay computer programmer and computer repair guy. That's not something I can apply when I'm at the grocery store, when I'm driving to or from the grocery store, when I'm out walking the dog, or when I'm on the phone with my doctor making an appointment. It is a very, very, very narrow, specific set of abilities that thieves employ, not a holistic skill system. So no, I do not think NWPs should be in the game.
Can we get a question answered from the chat here? Who exactly is poor orc child referring to
Yeah.
when they say, who let this guy on the show? This is very important to me.
Probably you, but it could be me.
I would like to see that question answered. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Put him on the spot.
Yeah.
Come on, poor orc guy. Yeah. So, for me, so there's a couple of ways that I look at this. I agree with what Delver says in terms of it not being a skill-based system, but he also probably knew, it seems to me, that he knew that I was going to bring up thieves, and that's an astute observation. So if it's not a skill-based system and it's more avatar-based, then perhaps the inclusion of the thief in the first place as a specialist or whatever was a little bit out of line and something that would have to be corrected later.
You did not even just do that.
Well, I mean, let's look at it from a practical point of view, right? Because in the original iterations of the game, it's like, yeah, anybody can try to open a trap. Anybody can do whatever. It's all exploratory. You go and you explore. You tell the DM what it is that you're exploring very specifically, and the DM will make the determination of whether or not that is successful. Might have you roll a d6 or two and determine the outcome. Might even go so far as to say, in old school D&D, it's very simple to say, okay, what do you want to do? And the guy says, hey, yeah, I'm going to go look around that chest for traps. Another guy says, I'm going to go look at secret doors or whatever. And the DM in his mind puts in, hey, okay, cool, roll a d6. And if it's a favorable result based on whatever the DM has determined in his mind should be the success threshold, then he'll go ahead and make it a success or a failure based on that roll. And that's really a simplified version of that. So if the game is not going to lean towards in the future, now guaranteed nobody was able to see in the future, but if it wasn't going to lead into the future to looking back on this stuff and trying to think about things, disparities, like, okay, so the thief can hear noise. All right, cool. Well, and the DMG, everybody can hear noise, and there's key near individuals that get damn near as well a chance or better to hear noise than the first level thief. So
Mhm.
those types of contradictions and stuff make it curious why the thief was included in the first place. But I tend to operate off of the assumption that since the thief has been created and he's part of the game, now we have to kind of think about relativity in terms of what individuals can do relative to one another, because now you've introduced a character who's supposed to be relatively better than everyone else at certain tasks where relativity wasn't originally part of the equation. So it opens the fucking can of worms. Oh, sorry. It opens the can of worms that we all have to work with. And certain designers decided to work with it in certain ways. Other designers decided to work with it in other ways. GMs, DMs, referees, players, and all of that kind of stuff. And these Orange Spine books, particularly since we're talking about WSG and DSG, they give you ideas for how to reconcile some of the earlier contradictions without having to reprint books, right? Um, and my biggest lament actually is that non-weapon proficiencies is a clumsy term. It should not have been chosen. It should not have been tied to the concept of weapon proficiencies, and it should have flown in or flowed into the secondary skills. Okay, because it is said in the DMG that secondary skills are like your background career, right? So I'm perfectly comfortable playing AD&D, rolling up a secondary skill or two as the table dictates, or none
Mhm.
whatsoever, and being like, okay, my character's background is he's a trapper, and that's all there is to it, and I'm totally fine with that. But the DMG's use of the word career in describing that contradicts the concept within my mind. And doesn't actually tell what the character is capable of doing. The thief muddies the water because now all of a sudden you've got a character that's relatively better at certain things than the other characters when that didn't have to be the case in the first place. And secondary skills should have been reverted and moved out into things that a character might be relatively better at. Now, maybe
I
you
do want to.
could go ahead. Go ahead. I'm
I was.
basically done, and I'm going to ramble if I keep going.
Well, I was just going to say I do want to point out um, something that is irritating to me personally as a player about, and this has to do with the Ranger class, which I play in Great Old Ones campaign. He's doing a great job. This has nothing to do with him as a GM. If it did, I would absolutely say so here in front of everyone, but it
I
doesn't.
play a ranger as well.
Appreciate it.
But
Thank
there
you.
are some very broad skills listed at the beginning of the character description that are never given any methodology of quantifying,
Mhm.
like hunting. Setting traps is one that seems to be not used that much by rangers, but they're not given any method of quantifying. So that, to me, that's part of the charm of first edition AD&D, is that you have all these one-off, just flowery language scenarios that makes it nostalgic and charming, but it doesn't help you run a game to have, like, it's not, there's so much going so many directions already, that a lot of this stuff in these I view as like giving you methods to handle some of the ranger stuff. That, you see what I'm saying? Like, that stuff just has a name and nothing, and some of these wilderness skills would seem to like line up with that a little bit. That's a niche thing, I know, but
Well, if you want to role play snaring rabbits on our game night, we can go ahead and do that. Yeah.
I mean, I told you I'm an outlier. I like
Yeah.
I like overland, you know, campaigns. Dungeons for me are um that's the end of in comic books they would have an annual. Is anybody
Mhm.
familiar
Sure.
with that concept?
Sure.
You do a dungeon on the annual. Everything else is plot and storyline and overland adventures, potentially leading to the annual, which is a dungeon. That's just I don't know why I'm
Okay.
talking about that. It's not the
Yeah.
topic, but
I'm actually going to go out on a limb and say I half agree with Dooms, especially about the thief class. To me, as someone looking at it many years later, this is sort of the beginning of what's a class and what's a subclass. Something that is still often misused in these days. I was talking to Richard Witters about his new game Rudigers, and we were kind of talking about this a little bit. And for me, if it's a class, there has to be a significant difference in play style between your character and some others. So, for example, it's very easy to see the difference between a fighting man or fighter and a mage because one is casting spells and they have a different way to conserve it. Another is you're punching or stabbing things. And the thief in AD&D, as someone playing one, it's interesting because it's starting to make the compromise, because the thief is really a fighter, but he's not going to be as good as a regular fighter. But we're going to give him all sorts of other bonuses instead, which could really help the party out, especially not, so far Fingers hasn't died of poison, but theoretically he's better at popping those chests than the others would be. And that's kind of why I say it's half there. Like, to me, thief should really be a subclass of fighter, where that's how I see ranger. Like, it's not really its own class. It's kind of a subclass of fighter, at least for most of its until you get into upper levels and it gets spells. And to me, it's also one of the issues is I say, like, historical and cultural. Why in later editions, wizards and clerics are like kind of sort of almost played the same. I think it's because in the 70s, more people went to church, so more people had an idea of religious obligations, and therefore they would naturally play a cleric differently from a wizard. Whereas in modern days, when nobody goes to church, like they're kind of played the same way. So to me, this is like the root, the genesis of where the class subclass divide is coming from.
interesting. I would agree with that. I mean, that's I don't. We've only started playing together in Delver's Tuesday night thing, so I don't know how familiar you are personally with first edition, but that's a really good takeaway for someone if you aren't overly familiar with it. I think we're probably at about the same level, I would say, based on what I've seen.
Yep.
I do have another issue if you guys want to keep talking.
I'll talk. Yeah, you've heard it.
Somebody uppity bar tab. You know what? I am kind of uppity. Thanks for calling it out, buddy.
Guys, I actually am going to have to step away. This has been
Thank you, Bill.
This has been actually a great chat, and it's been good to talk to all you guys and put you in your places, and I appreciate you sitting still for that. So, Yang, thank you very much for having me here to school these youngsters, and
Thanks for coming.
You're quite welcome. Gentlemen, have an absolutely fun one. I will see you guys around the way.
See you, man.
Take care.
See you Saturday for Nerd Council of Doom.
Nerd Council of Doom. Peace.
I have to say, you guys' plans though do not seem to be coming to fruition. I've been there every Saturday lurking, and the plans just don't seem to be coming through. You need to step up your Council of Doominess.
I agree.
But it is
perhaps they should listen to some doom metal. Perhaps they should listen to some doom metal. Candlemass, hell, Sabbath. Go way
Sure.
back.
There's a lot more regulations to being evil than you would think. More red tape.
That's
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
once again, that is a topic, but it's one I want to talk about. But if you guys want to talk about that, I'm happy to. I had another one from the books, but since we lost Delver, maybe I feel like I shouldn't talk about this stuff anymore because he would uh, not get his chance to. Let's. I'm going to switch it up if you don't mind. Maybe this fall I did bring this up under the drow. But what are your thoughts on playing evil groups? It's something I plan to do in Rollmaster, in my Rollmaster campaign. I realize that's not first edition AD&D, but I've run evil groups in first edition AD&D, and I've got stories there. But what are you guys' general thoughts on that? I don't. It's not the usual thing, but it's a nice divergence from the normal game, in my opinion.
Clockwise,
Great
Yang.
Yeah. Okay. Me.
Yeah, so good. Sorry.
So I would say, well, kind of funny story about this. The first test group that I had for running through Empire of the Undying Sun, they were some friends that I had played with previously, and we had 6 people, and 3 of them had chosen a god that demands blood sacrifices and is trying to enter the world to consume it, and the other 3 were good. And I just said, I'm going to sit back and see what happens. And it was amazing. I am fine with evil campaigns. Especially if on a lark, if you tell them it's an evil campaign, because then everybody's going to out evil everybody else, which is fantastic. I am also okay with letting people be evil aligned in a non-evil campaign, and just letting other players figure it out. I do tell them, like, hey, you might get your character murdered if the others figure out like you're trying to sacrifice their children. And as long as they're okay with that, I'm good with it. So,
Great old ones. What do you think?
Great old ones. What do you think? You're just good with that?
In my experience, I noticed a lot of players have a hard time really playing evil characters. It definitely would have to be a one-off or something, because you couldn't get really bad people to cooperate for that long. And most people use it as an excuse to just do terrible things to one another at the table. That's what my character would do, as opposed to really doing the whole plotting the destruction of mankind thing and coming together as a small group to see to your own ends, instead of because the game really should be cooperative play, and you should encourage players to at least be good and and that's cooperative play, whereas evil is the opposite of that. Not that it couldn't work, it just doesn't seem to work the way people think it should.
I would actually say cooperation is the far scalable, most evil endpoint of evil.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's true. And in that campaign I mentioned, the good players, the evil players, like, they weren't overtly snidely whiplash,
right,
mustachio twirling guys. They got the good players to continually do more and more evil things, in service of, like, we gotta get out of here. We gotta. There's one part where there's a zombie invasion, and they're supposed to be, theoretically, they're supposed to be helping people get out of town, escape onto the water, and like they just, the evil ones convince the good members of the group, like, hey, we can't take them to the boat. We're not going to make it. We got to go. We have this important object that we're carrying. And it's like, dang. And there's another part where if they want a tournament, so they could ask a god a question, but in order to ask that god a question, there has to be a human sacrifice. involved, and they're like, well, hey, we got to ask this god this question because it's really important. And they talk the good players into doing that. And as a DM, I just sat there and I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing.
But you're
So
telling
it
this
can
story.
work.
That you're telling this story. Yeah, and I agree. Now, Dooms, I know, has something to say about this, and I don't mean to talk over your chance to talk, but I do just want to say you have to do it with a group of people who trust each other
Yes,
and have known
yes.
each other for a long time. You don't just take a bunch of noobs who've never played together and play an evil group. You
Yes.
or you don't do that unless you've laid it down ahead of time. You're playing evil. Your character could die by another character's hand if you guys don't work together at any time. The end. Sorry. Oh, go ahead, Doomsword. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, there's not much I can really add to it because uh all of the points are good. So from Gonzalo's perspective, that unified evil is the ultimate evil. Let's just look at the 9 alignment system and look at lawful evil is certainly the most
Mhm.
evil because that's evil in an authoritarian sense, right? So they have to get along. They're like-minded individuals. They get along. That's why you'll find things like you'll find your orcs being lawful evil. You'll find your demons being lawful evil because they're organized in their hierarchy. You'll find your devils being chaotic evil. You'll find things like goblins or whatever being chaotic evil. There are very few things that are actually neutral evil, which is the ultimate evil because it's evil at all costs. But there's alignment, distinctions, and groups. So I appreciate that, and I would say that as long as what it made me think of is that as long as everybody is the same flavor of evil, they're all going to get along. And then of course the matter of dealing with it with experienced players and bringing it out up front is very valid. And then as Yang said, I've done both. I've run evil campaigns and found that people haven't truly been evil. That where I find the most evil in a game is with somebody who's decided that they're going to be chaotic neutral, but they're actually gonna. It's what my character would do. Yeah, well, you know what? The dwarf sleeping. Yeah, I piss on his face. And that kind of stuff. Just a disruptive type of individual that decides to play a disruptive type of character, that's the worst for the game. But I think if everybody's on the same page and a similar alignment, it can work. And then that goes into Great Old One's point, which is that for the most part, unless it's some sort of contrived example, you or basically in a one shot, hey, you guys are all lawful evil characters. You guys are all chaotic. I mean, I don't see a bunch of chaotic evils getting along with anybody. I don't see a bunch of neutral evils getting along with anybody. Lawful evils, yes, but it would have to be kind of contrived. And the various fantasy worlds have that, right? You might have in Faerun, you might have the Red Wizards of Thay. In D&D itself, the aforementioned orcs and demons. You've got in Forgotten Realms, you have the Zentarim. You have the Scarlet Brotherhood in Greyhawk. You have the Palmage, even though it's loosely aligned. These are generally either totally locked down areas of supreme evil that's run by the state, or they're chaotic areas. And most times when you run a chaotic or an evil campaign with a bunch of players, you're going to end up with a chaotic game because they're just not going to get along.
The reason I wanted to talk about this is that I'm going to run something that is going to be a West Marches style game. And my concept is that it will be there will be good groups and there will be evil groups in the game, and they might never encounter each other, but they might encounter each other. And it's essentially a role-playing PvP server, if that's what it turns into. It doesn't have to be that. They don't have to encounter each other at all. I'm not going to well, Bill's not here, so it's going to be a Rollmaster thing. So, but trolls in first edition Rollmaster, trolls and orcs are a playable race. This is 1980. Um, now that doesn't mean you couldn't have a group of evil elves in the game as well, or whatever, half elves. There's no elves on the land. So I kind of wanted opinions on this stuff to feed into my idea for what I want to do, and I've really noticed no one wanting to play evil characters, and I've found it puzzling.
Well, I have a theory about this, and it's actually something I had to write about in my campaign guide, which is in the year of our Lord 2026, you need to explain what evil is, because unless you're talking to old farts, like young people, evil is just something they don't like. It's not like a pattern of action. So, I have to go in there and describe like, hey, if I have like a god or a nation that is labeled as evil, um, it doesn't mean that they can't get along or something like that, but it means that they're willing to do something that is evil. They will never consider themselves evil.
Right.
But there has to be an on the table and an over the table morality. And an over the table morality is what we would classically consider evil. Like if I beat the crap out of you to get information, that's an evil act. If I like, if your party members are sort of like stealing from each other as like pranks, that's one thing. But if you're stealing from other players or anybody else, really, it could be an evil act unless you have some sort of justification for it. So, to me, like, I would suggest you explain what evil means, because otherwise they're going to think like everyone's just out to stab each other in the back in an evil party whenever it happens. Whereas that's not the case. Evil people are all around us. I suggest people look into their executive suite at their jobs. Most of those people are not good or neutral. So, we can see examples of functioning evil people in the world.
Yes. That's a great point. I would say there's two different like in the thing I'm talking about. If you have a group that's playing orcs and trolls, there's enough cultural animosity there alone with the humans and elves, that half elves that exist on this era. It's called the what is the name of the place again? I can't remember it right now. Anyways, there's enough cultural animosity between those groups to just kill each other on sight. Their cultures alone are diametrically opposed, which doesn't necessarily make one group good or evil, other than orcs are evil and trolls are evil as a general rule. Their cultures
Sure.
are considered, they're more destructive towards other people's rights. They don't like freedom. They don't, stuff like that. Now, there are plenty of like elvish societies that could be considered to not care about freedom either. Oh, it's just laws. We have laws to protect you. So you can. I think it would be a much more difficult thing if you had a whole group of evil high elves, for example, as to play than like, or a much more difficult situation to describe what evil is among just a group of half elves, some evil, some not evil. That would be the problem. If it's the cultural things, it's easy to pit that stuff against each other.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The elves feel aggrieved for past aggressions by humans or dwarves, and so they're going to go out and reclaim their territory, or they just think like, hey, these guys are going to come hunt us, so we better get them before they get us. I mean, I think it's not that hard to
the elves in Skyrim. What are they called? What are the ones that it's a computer game. Anyways, I don't know if anybody else has played that or not, but there are some elves who basically oversee a culture there and sort of run thing, or at least have a major influence on the Nordic society there. I consider them that would be an example of what I consider to be evil, meddling in other people's cultures,
Sure.
and part of the agreement, the agreement that ended the last war was your god is not to be worshipped anymore. That's a culturally destructive thing, and that to me is objectively evil.
Okay, but when the conquistadors made the Aztecs stop cutting the hearts out of prisoners and eating them and throwing the bodies down the steps of the temple, like, is that a bad thing? So there's some nuance here of what you consider good and evil.
I would classify that under one of those things you just have to have a war over, and they won. The conquistadors won.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I wanted to say something with regard to what Gonzalo said, is that I think the idea of a West Marches type game where people can be good or evil, or any other sort of game, a drop in, drop out type of thing, even if it doesn't necessarily entail you roll out to the dungeon and you come back the same day, or it doesn't necessarily entail domain play or anything like that. I think that's great because each individual isn't tied to a specific character. So which is my preferred game style, by the way. But in that kind of approach, I can see that working perfectly, because less. There's less personal ownership of the character, assuming that the individual who's playing it is not, in fact, evil himself as a person. You kind of break that ownership tie, and you can have multiple characters operating in the world at cross purposes. So I think it's worth exploring for sure. I'll say one other thing, as a matter of fact, since nobody said anything.
We gave him a minute to talk.
Gonzalo's muted.
Well, I'm of the particular sort that considers alignment in a very nuanced way, because the fact that alignment change, and I don't want to drag it, but we almost touched on philosophy and stuff, but the fact that alignment can change and it can happen while a person or a character doesn't know that it's happening, that they're drifting, means that there's basically two alignments in the world, right? Which goes into, I think, what Yang was kind of talking about, is socially, morally, ethically, and those kinds of things. There's the alignment that you believe that you are.
Yeah.
And there's the alignment that you actually are, that you don't know you are, right? Like I might consider myself to be, generally a neutral, good type of person. But who knows? I might be chaotic good and just haven't identified that about myself. And it's probably the case. Hopefully I don't lean towards evil tendencies.
Unfortunately,
but,
I think I'm chaotic neutral. I think that's
I switch.
I'm sorry.
No, that's good, man.
Thank you for the somebody out there said that you may have some luck. Rob said you may have some luck with guest irregular players for your evil group. Well, that's good. That's good to hear. And you're right. That's a good idea, Yang. I think maybe what I should do on my the Iron Wind Rollmaster thing is I should define what our associations like people would typically have, even if I don't define it as good or evil. Typically, if you're a troll, you're going to try to kill all the half-elves you come across, almost without exception, unless you're taking them as prisoners or something. And maybe that'll help allay people's hesitance to want to play evil, caught pissing on sleeping dwarves. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think you almost need to, especially in the world that we are in today, where most people don't have any solid religious
We're in the same
base
world.
or training.
We're in the same world. The people are just different.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you're not. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I do not vibe with, like, I tried running a 1E game with some much younger people, and the first time somebody died, they rage quit, and I totally get it because they had questions I couldn't answer other than this is the rules are this way, and it's just one, it's first edition. No, there's no role for that. It just happens. It says in the module that it happens.
Mhm.
So um, it wasn't a wholly negative thing, but it was clear that like I was out of step with the kids, and
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's okay if you explain things beforehand. Um, like when I do the 5e test groups, there are parts of the campaign guide where there are no death saving throws, and I explain that beforehand. So they're not, well, I do sort of throw it as a surprise, but I do say it's played a lot more like 1E, so that when that comes up, they're like, "Oh my god," and all of a sudden they start playing a lot more like a 1E player. So I think if you set expectations, and this is really a DM issue, if you set expectations for how your world works, people will generally act appropriately within that setting. You're going to find the outlier who's just a whiny baby. But in general, I don't see it as that big of a deal for
I,
younger people if they are explained, like the expectations.
should we have story time before we wrap up tonight? Everybody give a personal, a funny story about any of the topics that we've done tonight.
We could certainly do that. Apparently, I like to talk while I'm muted. But now I'm not. The problem is that my little browser screen where I can respond to the private chat that tells me I'm muted is unresponsive. So I can't click in there. I could refresh and then I'd have to rejoin the stream or whatever. But now I'm vocal. We could do that. We could answer. I think we've got a few questions. I would like to say that, yeah, as a matter of fact, I was reading, and maybe this goes into the funny stories thing. I was Age Advice for a little side database project or whatever. And one of the first Sage Advice columns that was fielded by Gene Wells in the early Dragon magazine is somebody somebody said, "Hey, so we have this paladin who likes to take a ring of regeneration. His favorite term or whatever is convert or die or something like that, and he likes to put rings of regeneration on like an orc's arm, rip its face off, and bare hands, and wait till the ring of regeneration puts the face back on, and do it over and over again." So back then, our generation
Right.
knew what it was to be evil, to where they would have to write in to Dragon Magazine and be like, "Hey, is this guy ripping this face off and regenerating and doing it over and over again? Convert or die, and then he's going to kill him anyway. Is that an evil act?" Well, nowadays it's like, yeah, man. But back then it's like, hey, that's just, yeah, please answer that for me. I mean, that's just kind of part of the landscape, right?
I did have a. I mean, I've got two kind of stories. One is I had a rage quit once. Is anybody familiar with the Harn world setting?
Yes.
So I was running I was using Rollmaster as the system and running a Harn world game, and the group ran into Noron. Now, Noron is sort of a combination of Beorn and Tom Bombadil. I would say is the closest. That he's clearly a demigod of some kind, and he lives in this remote, like he has a village there, and these people worship they kind of worship him. They know he's a demigod. They're sort of his human hangers on or circle of people. And when you get there, you have to tell a story, or he basically takes everything from you, and you have to tell stories to earn the things he's taken from you as a tax back. And the one player basically couldn't didn't get the vibe I was laying down about the nature of Noron being a demigod. Everyone else got it, but for whatever reason, I didn't do a good job explaining it to him. And he cast a fireball on himself and the demigod, wound up getting thrown into prison, didn't hurt the demigod at all, hurt him way more. This is a Rollmaster, remember? And got thrown into prison. And he stood up and that's it, and was walking out. But he expected everyone to go with him, was the funny part of the story. And they were all like, bye, dude. I don't know why you didn't grok what was going on. That one, and I did run an evil group in first edition AD&D of much more experienced players. They walked all over me for the first part of it. But two of them wound up hanging in a town square later on. So not that it's GM versus party, but if a party is being evil, I feel like it's okay to be a little more GM versus party. Like it gives you an excuse as a GM also to really like allow you to be a little bit more of a dick as a GM. That makes sense. Sorry.
And do it relatively too, if I can just interject without hopefully interrupting anybody.
Yep. No, go
do it
ahead.
relatively, right? So, if lawful evils walk into a lawful good town, yeah, they might hang in the town square. But if lawful goods walk into a lawful evil town, the same thing might take place, right? So you have to shift the alignment and the reactions, and I'm sure that's obvious to you, but for anybody it's not. The law and the morality and the ethics of each situation is relative depending on where you are and what you're doing. I've had many players get imprisoned by doing stupid stuff, and they're like, "Hey, why'd you do that?" And I'm like, "Dude, they're about to impale you on spikes tomorrow. Yeah, you attacked the guards. This is a lawful neutral stronghold. That stuff don't fly."
I had a guy who came from the video game world. You could do a whole topic on people who game from having only done video games, and he was from another culture, and he went up to this castle, and he's basically was just out there to try to forge alliances, or just as an ambassador to these places. But he's talking to the guards because he's separated from the group for a while, and he's telling them, "Oh, I'm from this other country. I'm here to take note of like how many troops you have," and he's basically describing a spy to the guard of the keep. So I threw him in prison. I was like, they grabbed him and threw him in prison.
That's where he should rot,
right? As a confessed spy. And then what I did was I had them throw a spy in the cell with him, a guy who pretended to be beat up by the guards, and he took him back to the party as his pal. That's a good role play, man. I mean, this stuff can really add to, like, you players will give you treasure if you just listen to what they're talking about. You get up to get coffee or whatever, you step away, you have an idea, and players will be talking about what they think is going on. And every once in a while, I'm like, shit, that's way cooler than what I was going to do. That is.
I'm writing that stuff down. Yep. I'm going to use that. That's a good idea. That's better than what I had.
Yes, way better.
I had a guy rage quit on me too. That was a lot of fun. You've heard this story before because it was in a Friday night group at the Lizard Man Mound in B2. as a younger player. He was playing a halfling thief, and they were beating up on the lizard men on the outside. He wanted to sneak in to get a jump on the lizard men that were still remaining inside the mound. And so he wanted to sneak in through that front door. And he got mad at me because I killed him when he walked right in the door. I said, what did you expect was going to happen? You walked in from the bright sun behind you, strolling right into 2 waiting lizard men, waiting for that to happen. Right? Just because you rolled a good sneak roll doesn't mean you're invisible. Yeah. And he got all mad because I ruined his player agency and stuff like this, and he quit. So,
and that's interesting because for me, I just realized it is that even though I've DM'd most of my time of playing D&D, the only people who have actually rage quit was when I was playing in the game. In the game with them. And that happened a few times. So I don't know if that says more about them or more about me, but yeah, I'm much better at getting them to quit when I'm a player myself.
I mean, this is what my character dude, guys. That's another thing that I find, like, at least at a like I have only anecdotal evidence for this, but a lot of the people who try to get into tabletop role playing games and their only experience is Skyrim or stuff is when they tend to think that I'm sorry, I forgot. I got distracted. I thought Doomsword was asking me a question. Sorry about that.
No, sorry, my kid was talking to me.
No, they're not really. The game worlds, online game worlds like that, aren't designed to react to them like a normal society would.
Yeah, and I brought this up. I can't remember who I was talking to, but one thing that people who are into tabletop games, especially old people, you have to remember about younger people is, for the most part, when we started gaming, you played a tabletop game first, and then later you played like some sort of computer RPG. Now it's the other way around. Right. They play all sorts of JRPGs, Skyrim, all that kind of stuff. And then they're like, oh, that sounds cool. I'll play D&D. So, their expectations are skewed. And, that's why I say again, like...
now they're mad that you're making them count arrows.
Yeah, I mean, and not to get into a whole session 0 debate, but it is often useful if you meet, especially with brand new players, ahead of time, to be like, hey, look, this is how this game is being played. You're in or you're not,
Good for any game. You should explain that sort of stuff the way you want to run things up front, no matter who you're playing with, even your friends. Hey, this is the way I want to run things and all this this is the kind of game I want to play. And, that way nobody gets any surprises with stuff that happens, and you hang on to your friends longer.
Yeah. All right. My turn for a funny story then. Well, getting back into the, what is good and what is evil, you sort of have to make the decision, the ultimate decision, like, especially when it gets to divine figures. So in my games, I usually let players make their own religions with guidelines. And so one of the guidelines is you have to tithe. But what tithing means can be different. So I had one guy, he worshipped a goddess who was the goddess of life and the goddess of fertility. And part of that is she's also the goddess of grain and the harvest. And so her thing is alcohol. So his tithing is, instead of directly giving money to the temple, he had, his part of his backstory was like his family owns a bar. So he had to brew alcohol, which he would then give out to the population as his tithe. He would have to spend resources to make this stuff. And she...
I love that religion.
Well, the goddess loved it because, like I said, she's the goddess of life, and she wants whatever makes more life. And drunk people smash, therefore, there's going to be more life. And so, like, part of it too is like he was not discriminatory. So he's given alcohol to like teenagers and stuff, and and you have to think, like, is that a good act? Yes or no? And I came down, ultimately for the game, like, yes, that is a good act because he is promoting the will of a good goddess who, wants life. So, you can have some things which are a little bit questionable, but under the right circumstances could go sort of in either direction. And that's why you, as the DM, need to make the ultimate decision of what is good and what is bad. The players can do whatever they want, but it's up to you to decide, what's evil, what's chaotic, what's lawful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to make a point with regard to all that, but then I forgot it, and I think I remembered what Gonzalo was getting at earlier, which I think I could be mistaken, but I think the last thing that you said it was related to it's what my character would do, right?
Oh, right. Though that it tends to be a trait, anecdotally, a trait of people who come from video games, who don't have to cooperate and all that stuff. And I would say, as someone who's been a professional brewer, beer has been a foundational staple of the human diet for at least 5,000 years, and in any other time other than the last 100 years, people, agrarian people would absolutely give their kids beer. Now, I'm not saying get them drunk, but they would have a glass of beer from time. I mean, I guarantee you that was going on. There was no reason not to. There's a sandwich in every glass.
Yeah.
Safer than the water.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's correct. There's a book called like Six Glasses or something. I can't remember what it was called. It basically went over the history of beer over 6,000 years, and I wish I could remember what the name of that book was, but very interesting book. It traces history through beer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, it was a major driver from what I understand, and I used to work as a waiter and a bartender many years ago in the Orlando theme park industry, and right outside it. And people would come over and they would expect, a family would come in to eat, and they would expect you to serve their 13, 14-year-old son a glass of beer. And it's like, dude, I'm going to get fired and arrested, and instead they'd just be like, well, okay, cool. I'm not tipping you.
Ouch. Do we miss anyone?
I don't think so.
Do we have any questions we want to deal with, or are we good? Or I can't really scroll through.
I have many more. I did not even get through half of the topics I had listed here.
Yeah.
So
I got like 2 hours, man.
Yeah. But I mean, it was fun. I was expecting one thing and got something completely different. Having Delver on, that's a good. He's a great voice for strict adherence to 1E stuff with valid. I think I take a lot of inspiration from Delver. I think that a lot of what he characterizes as old man arguments for things aren't that different than the types of arguments I make for the things that he argues against. Mine are just couched in little drunkenness and hipsterism. That's the only difference. His are couched in like an encyclopedic historical knowledge of the game. So I think you know who to trust there. Fun time.
Yeah, this was great. Love this.
Thank
This
you.
is always a blast talking about this kind of stuff.
Well, thanks for coming, guys. For anyone who is interested, 3 out of 4 of us will be playing AD&D 1E next Tuesday night on the Dungeon Delvers channel. And for anyone who hasn't, go to the Great Old Ones, sub to him. A lot of good talk. He is often with Gonzalo Lira's Bar Tab. And go over to Doomsword's channel if you're not sub to him already. doing more and more live streams, and also he's got some great tools for 1E and what would you say, reinventions or reinterpretations of a lot of the monsters for 1E?
Yeah, there's that, and thanks for the little spotlight there. Yeah, there's that, but what I'm getting ready to introduce right now is actual 1E SRD based on like CC by attribution, which Wizards requires right now. I've got I'm almost done with the first 3 levels of spells for every single character. I've got a document sitting aside that instructs from the idea of a character all the way through with all the matrices and everything like that. Yeah, uh, monsters is part of it, but that's part of like my own completely original work, bringing more kind of advanced gridded play to the monsters. And but it's really all about organizing stuff. I'm going through the final edit of the spells from the first 3 books, and it's still, after all of these years and a final edit, I've done this like 8 times, and I'm still finding things that don't make sense between them, and things that have to be sort of researched and sussed out to make it as accessible as possible for a modern audience. So that's primarily what I'm trying to do, right? Organize, make accessible, and not let stuff die.
Nice. And for anyone who's interested, go check out at the Nerd Council of Doom. We will have a show this Saturday at 3 p.m. I do not know the topics yet, but we will be trying to take over the world. And next week, I have Jonathan Colton, who has a new comic, which actually looks pretty cool. It's got a little bit of a send up of the Billy Goat's Gruff. So we'll see what he's up to. So thanks for coming, everyone, and we'll see you next time.